Okay.
Welcome everybody to the Corporate Services meeting, 15th of April 2025. We'll start with a prayer. Almighty and ever-living God, in whose hands and the rights and hopes of all people look graciously on us who govern. Guide us that our counsels may be wise and our decisions just. Amen. Amen. I'll call for apologies. Are there any apologies? Move Francois.
Yeah.
I'll move.
Yep, so I'll move it. Peter will second that. Declarations of interest. Public forum petitions or deputations.
None today.
Today. Going to item 5, confirmation of the minutes. The council minutes, 18th of March 2025. The recommendation is that the committee resolves 1, to confirm the minutes of the Corporate Services Committee meeting held on 18th March 25 are true and correct record.
Happy to move that.
Have I got a seconder? So we've got Peter and Andy. Matters arising from the minutes? So matters arising? No, so action list. We've got 2 items on the action list. The first one is to provide an update on the fringe benefit tax disclosure, voluntary disclosure and action transferred from the RAC meeting of 19th November 24 to Corporate Services Committee. I've just had an update from Peter. That update will be basically that will be complete on Thursday, the 17th of April. So we'll better tick that one off. Item 2 on the action list is to prepare a paper for the committee to provide options for the catastrophe fund, including whether and continue growing fund and reinvesting interest or use the interest for other purposes, ensuring alignment with existing investment policies. That's ongoing. And there's going to be a paper presented to that in May, in the May committee meeting. Can I have a mover for the action list, please?
Councillor Cummings.
Yep. And Peter Haddock. Brett Cummins and Peter Haddock.
Move that item 1 be removed and 2 be carried over.
2 be carried over. Yep. Basically, the chair's report, if we go down to that. As PwC, as Peter Miller, on the action list that the fringe benefits tax will be sorted and we'll have a response by Thursday, the 17th of March. Can I have that noted down?
April.
That moved? April, sorry, did I say March? Sorry. Go have a move for that, please. Yeah, Chris Cole and Brett Cummins. Righto. So reports, we've got 2 reports. 8.1, Office of the Chief Executive Quarterly Report Update. And that will be handed over to Joe.
Morning, councillors.
Joe?
The purpose of this report is to give you a bit of a broader update around what my group does, which is the Office of the Chief Executive. You see us sitting around the table here, but you don't see everything else that we have going on in the background. Some key points to note really, the governance group we've been able to expand that, and we've welcomed Dion on, who's making a huge difference for us, and we've got another person coming to join us next week. So we'll be able to be more efficient, and eventually we'll be transferring over the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act requests back to us as well. So that's quite exciting. People and capability, we've been focusing on getting the organisational culture plan and the different HR policies up and running and improved. Communications and engagement, Teresa's been and Rachel have been very, very busy with, as you can see, quite a few requests and inquiries and keeping the Facebook and the website up to date. That's another thing that's actually quite invisible, the amount of work that goes into that space. So it's really great to be able to start giving you some statistics around what's going on there. Facilities and fleet, we have had been busy trying to get the car parks a little bit more sorted, and we're actually going to try and fix up a little bit further out the back here before the rain starts to really hit, to make it more suitable for our vehicles. And finally, little foundational statistics there for you, showing that we've got actually a really good balance of males and females in this organisation, which is great to see compared to some previous organisations I've worked at. And the length of service is an interesting one because it shows we've had a significant change in staff, and we've got a lot of people who are here that are less than 2 years. But we've also got quite a few people who have been here for quite some time and bring a lot of institutional and coast knowledge that we can still draw on as we are moving forward as a modern organisation. Any questions?
Nothing for me. Any questions?
Just a question, Joe. So that's having the other support officer to help Deanne coming on board. We won't require the contractor to do the Lagoima request, which has been a lot of work, hasn't it? You know?
Yeah, so I'm intending that to be a sort of a slow transition. So we'll get the other person on and we'll get the governance sorted first, and then we'll start picking up the simple Lagoimas in the first instance. Tony is highly experienced and we'll want to keep her on to provide support for the really complex cases that we get coming through. So I can't see it finishing completely, but we would like to be doing all of the simple ones in-house.
And can I just add there, Chairman, that the vast majority are simple, and it is right and proper that we in-house that and don't pay contractor rates for those simple ones. But as some councillors have seen of late, there are some incredibly detailed and complex Lagoimas going on, particularly around court cases and things where it's really, really necessary to work to the letter of the law and work with the Ombudsman. At some of those very specific cases, we might still use Tony's expertise.
Excellent. Any more questions?
Yeah. Is it normal in a council to have this high staff turnover? Like well over half your people here have been less than 2 years.
It's
Where
not,
do you find all these qualified people? Well, we're not finding qualified people.
it's not necessarily turnover because we have, as you know, increased our staff numbers as well.
Yeah.
So we haven't necessarily had that many people leave, as many as we've brought on.
So
this-
can I just comment there? Sorry,
Yeah,
this is
well,
really
just on this
important.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really important. So look, I just want to repeat the story that we've told quite a few times.
Yeah, well, I've said this story, don't have to repeat it.
Right.
I
Okay.
do.
But you've asked the question. So for the record, I want to.
Yeah.
When I arrived here, we had 20 plus roles that weren't filled. I didn't have a finance team.
Yeah.
So many of these 2-year people here are the people that were brought on into those roles.
Right.
And what I would say is, I think that the mix of our organisation with these new people and the new skills that have come in is highly complementary to the much more long-serving people that have got amazing institutional knowledge and knowledge of the coast and of our business. And I think we've got the best of both worlds in terms of our staff makeup right now. And I think that's actually working quite well with us. So it's the people that have come on for 2 years is the vacancy gaps that this organisation experienced, which unfortunately as councillors you've been bearing the brunt of, because we haven't had a finance function. We can't turn up to the rating schemes and haven't been able to say how much money they've got, and now we've plugged that, and that's what those stats are saying.
Just to follow on from that, Darryl, would it be fair to say that there's full-time staff come on where contractors were doing that job as well on top of that?
Absolutely. And look, I'll make the comment. When I first came on as CEO and you first interviewed me, you did say to me that you did not want this organisation as it was then dominated by contractors and consultants, and you wanted to in-house more. But again, what I've said is, and I think we've done that, but you've got to give me the flexibility to work within the budget you've given me and the KPIs you've given me and the LTP KPIs to arrive at the right mix of consultants, contractors and staff, either permanent, fixed term or casual, to do the job and get the best value for the community out of that.
One more question. How many years have been on deck now, Daryl?
It's pulling up 2 years.
So that pretty much answers that quite quick question.
Yeah.
Through the chair, if I could add to that, I started this council, just, coming up 2.5 years ago. The place was fully reliant on contractors. We had contractors doing half the work, and that went not only through the corporate team, but we also had that through the operations team. And one of the things that I said was we've actually got to get staff back in the house like it was, and that's that. I know it's election year. I know there's a bit of political campaigning going on about the numbers of staff, but if you compare them to the vacancies that are there, the council was unable to recruit, and getting those staff members up to speed and doing away with a lot of the contractors, I think it's a great move. And just reminding the councillors, we went right through this in the LTP and approved the CEO to do these numbers. So I was part of that approval along with all the other councillors. I don't think anyone objected to those numbers. So that's.
We'll just finish off.
And I think one other thing too, if I could note too in there, in the long-term staff, I think there's 2, if not 3, staff members that have been here for over 20 years, which is a great thing.
Yeah. And I think if you look at the staff numbers, we're talking about staff numbers and against contractors and the number of people from a financial basis, I think we'll be far better off with having in-house staff than we are. All right, any more discussion?
One thing that the West Coast and Bulla have suffered from is it's a really good place for a stepping stone for new staff coming on, because positions they end up in are really great to have on CVs, and then we've got to make sure that we don't lose them after we've gone through all the effort of training them. We've got to make sure that we encourage them and look after them to stay, not treat it as a stepping stone job to another job in another place.
Okay, 8.1 recommendation. It is a recommendation the committee resolves to receive the report. Can I have a mover for that, please? Yeah. Peter Ewan and Brett Cummins. Okay, 8.2 Information Services Group Quarterly Report. I'll get Blair to talk to that. Morning, Blair.
Morning. Morning, everyone.
Blair.
I apologise in advance for coughing. Everybody.
Oh, have you got COVID?
Not that I'm aware of.
No, it's all good then.
So this is the first quarterly report of this type from our group. So what I've endeavoured to do is to give a little bit of context about where we've come from over the last 12 to 18 months, as well as some information about the current projects and work that's happening, and a little bit of information about how we're approaching future work in that planning cycle. So as we see from the report, it is a busy time, and Joe's report also reflects that. So we're all kind of working in that busy environment together. So we have completed over the last 18 months to really try and reach a better level of maturity with all of our technology services, a number of key projects. So that's where I've started the focus on the report, is those key projects such as backup infrastructure, monitoring of our infrastructure, and security reviews and changes out of that. So that's really given us a much more stable platform as we sit here today for users using our services, both public and users here in the building, and a platform that we can take forward and do the next steps with, which is what we're seeing in some of those current projects. So those projects are all a reflection of what those overall technology objectives are. So our mission to simplify and make things a bit simpler and a bit easier for us and the users to manage on an ongoing basis. And also putting our cloud services and security at the center of all of those projects as well. So I won't list or go through each of those projects, but happy to pause if there's any questions about those historic projects.
I've got one question on page 3 of your report there. Intrate. Intrate is work to be done, is that correct?
Which one's that? Sorry,
So that's projects going down.
Internet.
Oh, the internet.
Internet, sorry. Yeah,
Internet.
so that's work to be done, is it?
So that's work that's been completed.
It's completed.
Yeah, so the intranet is essentially the landing page and landing area for all of the users on our system. So when they log into their council workstation, they get their intranet page, which has links to other systems, news articles for staff, that sort of landing.
So that's
area.
completed.
So that's completed.
Right.
Yeah.
Just make one comment. I think the security seems a lot better. We're not getting the same
And
scam emails we were getting there for a while.
No.
I think whatever you've done there, you've done a good improvement there.
Excellent. That's always good news. We'll just try and stay on top of those.
I'll get a few fishes.
and,
So so
Yes.
that's really works really well.
I think they only pick on the newbies, Chris.
Yeah, and it's a good example of those systems that have come in the last 18 months have really bolstered that stuff.
Yeah.
So before, when we didn't have good visibility and we didn't have good protection in that space, we can have a much higher level of confidence now. And that doesn't mean to say that we don't continue that work in that space, but it's always a bit of a moving piece now.
Because you did come up, I think it was 2 meetings ago, with the amount of well, how would you technically word it? The ones
Oh,
that-
the blocked messages?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's
was it around
around
1,400
around 12 to 14,000 a day generally. Blocked messages on the system, so
Yeah.
just busy. So it's
Yeah, that's very good.
in exact science, but I'm pleased to hear that it's better.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. That's
Excellent. No,
So that brings us through to some of the current projects that are underway. Some are nearing completion and others sort of just started. So we've got an aerial imagery project that's ongoing in collaboration with the other councils on the coast to provide updated aerial imagery across the whole West Coast region. And we're expecting that to be completed by the end of next year. It will be a 2-year project. And our asset management system is coming along nicely. So we've moved now out of the requirements gathering phase and working out what exactly all of these system needs to do. And the GIS team are now building that system. Just started last week. So that's looking really positive.
What is the GIS? What name?
So we use ArcGIS product suite. And that's a whole suite of servers and bits of infrastructure that all work together to give us our internal GIS systems and tools, as well as the public facing stuff as well. So a big part of that GIS infrastructure project that's slightly further down in the list there, it's all new. So we'll be retiring the old Westmaps public facing systems as well and cycling in new tools. And we've got new policy to make sure all the data that we publish, we've got confidence in, we know it's right. So that'll be a significant improvement for all the users of that system as well.
Where do you get all your aerial imagery from? Just
So at the moment, we work with the 3 councils and LINZ and the services provided by Aerial Surveys Limited. So they do all the flying and deliver us the processed output from that.
what's that like?
No, we do have that capability. We do that for bespoke little pieces,
Yeah.
but they can't give us yet the level of detail that the flights give us.
Yes.
Might be a question to Darryl. You mentioned there the aerial imagery, that's other councils. Is it a cost share with other councils too?
It is, yes. And with
Quarter,
LINZ as
quarter?
well.
So what I can say is that the cost sharing arrangement for the regular updating of aerial imagery over the years has been a long-standing cost-sharing arrangement between all the councils, and that's just rolled over again. So that's really good that there's a commitment, ongoing commitment, to share all that because we all need it.
So 4 of us, quarter, was it?
We have more of a share because we need more of the imagery across the whole region, whereas the district councils get their districts. But they also pay for some additional, more urban photography that we don't really have a need for. So there's some swings and roundabouts in there as well. And LINZ also contribute a subsidy to that project too.
Through the chair. Leo, are we comparing like the new asset management stuff we're going through now, registering? Are we comparing that with some of the old information and maps we've got?
Yes, so we're using the most up-to-date information we've got to supplement that asset management system, such as the aerial imagery. As new aerial imagery comes in, that system will just pick it up as it's published. So that's using the best of what we have at the moment and then cycling the new deliveries in as they come on.
Yeah, because I think we did have some reasonable information on our assets like a few years ago, didn't we?
Okay, so the new system, once it's all configured and built, will take in all the historic information over time, including as-built drawings and other details from when they were built and any alterations and that sort of thing. That'll be loaded up. So all that historical information that's kind of not in a tidy place, either digitally or on paper, can over time be scanned and put into the system. But what I would say is that the asset management system will also record, obviously, as we inspect each year, 2 years or 3 years, and we do that regular cycle of inspections, that those up-to-date inspections on the banks, let alone any new information, such as the as-built drawings for all the latest completed schemes, that will all go into the system as well. Yeah, so it will, over time, we'll capture that historic stuff you're talking about, Andy, as well as the contemporary modern stuff that we're doing now. But that takes time.
It's huge and stuff. Just wondering, it's would you like to see a drone stuff down there as well? Like some of the pictures of some of these things.
Yeah,
well, that'll go as well.
The system will support essentially any kind of content that we want to push its way. So whether that's documents or scanned documents that Darryl was saying, or output from drone imagery. So we'll be able to incorporate all of that into the new system. We'll have a much better picture of what's going on.
Right.
Yeah.
Blair, as you've said in your report through the chair, the provision of technology services across the council has historically suffered from a lack of investment and support. And reading your report through, I think this is a great part of the rebuild of the council functions. And I just thank you and the team for the progress that's actually happening here towards that. It's a central part of council's business, and it was identified that it was really lacking. So this is putting the council in really good stead going forward, for new council coming in. So good work. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could I also make a comment? So I really want to endorse what the chair is saying. When I arrived here almost 2 years ago, a lot of our systems were end of life, defunct, not working, had in IT terms been copied together with a number 8 wire with a staff member that no longer worked with us, all those sorts of things. So Blair's team is doing an amazing job, and I think the frontline staff are now really feeling that IT is really enabling them to do their work better than it's ever done before. I just want to make a really quick comment. And the regional chief executives have been discussing this, and some of us have been around. I'm on my 35th year of working this year, so I've seen a lot of things over the time, right from the 1990s. But what's happening in this IT space inside government, local government, but also private sector, is that once upon a time, particularly in the 90s and early 2000s, you'd onboard a new finance system. That would be good for 15 years, but the pace of technological change now is so rapid that when we actually are buying into this stuff and getting in, a version and getting it on board, and that the life of these packages are probably half that now. But what that is, so, you know, and you just look at your phones and how often you update all that and that sort of thing. So the life cycle is getting shorter for your IT and your costs are going up. But our communities have a higher and higher expectation that the IT serves the communities with the aerial photography and what's on our website and what they can get and available and all the plans or e-plans and all that kind of stuff, because that is where things are going and that's where society's going. And so this sort of report from Blair right around the country and all businesses, private sector as well, this is actually featuring much more than it ever did in our society's history because of the technological change and the costs that are going on there. Thanks.
For Blair. What about AI? Where does that fit into the council stuff? Is it?
So AI
Is there plans for that?
is something that we need to pick up as part of our next project cycle. There are some tools that are available, such as the meeting transcript tools that we do use from Content AI and those types of things. But we need to have more policy and more understanding around it and how we leverage it better. A good example of how we are using it, how some of the vendors we're working with use it, is we've got new wireless access points coming, and they use an AI tool that takes into account the building plans and the materials, the construction of the building, to tell us where to place them to get the best service for the users. So that's helpful, and so it's about learning more about it to leverage it better. I think down the track.
Just bear in mind that you know, a lot of the historical data, the conversion, you know, being able to convert it to the new platform is really a very important part, because it's, yeah, with you know, I'm telling my granny how to suck eggs, but the importance of that old data is real, and then if you want to be able to use it on the new platform, we need to make sure we've got conversions that you can transfer it to the new platforms.
Mr. Chairman, look, I'll just make a comment about AI, but I'll just deal with that one first. Look, I'll give you a really good example, Councillor Cole, and one that you'll know better than anybody, is that historic bed level data that was recorded in various sorts of ways over the years is so important to us to actually compare against the data of the bed levels today. And that's a great example of how we need one system with all that stuff that's in one place now, especially now that we're, you know, a lot of times we're not doing conventional just cross sections, are we? We're doing drones and lidars and all that sort of stuff. So all that is in one box. Yeah.
And the old data is on different datums too.
Yeah. But we've rectified a lot of that, and so for Oki, it's all to the same stuff now. Can I just talk about AI? So we have purchased an AI tool. It's running right now in this meeting. Okay. We use it for meeting minutes and those sorts of things to help us, but at the moment, but you still need a human, i.e. Dern, to have a look at that and make sure that it's right and those sorts of things. There is a growing area of practice in AI in the public service, and that's been in the media in the last couple of days. The public service, the PSA has been calling for you know, more guidelines and things. But there are some councils that are really exploring that, and the Chief Executive of Grey District, Joanne Sutherland, and I have been talking about going over to see Selwyn, who are doing some work on AI around their regulatory processes and things like that, because we're both interested in that. So, but what I would say is it's a vastly growing area of IT. It's probably the tier area. But I don't want to be out in front. I want to be probably not even a fast follower, but a slow follower, not sure everything's proven, and then little old West Coast might pick it up. But I don't want to be one of these big councils out in front. Yeah. Thanks.
Any more questions, please?
Just one comment through the chair. This is another one of these good news stories that you'd hope the media would pick up on, you know, the rebuild, and rather than some of the negative stuff. So it's just a good news story for the media.
Brilliant. Thanks, Blair. Thank you very much. It's a recommendation that the committee to resolve and receive the report. Can I have a mover for that, please? Yep, mate. General business? You got any general business? No general business? Okay, item 10, public excluded. I move that the public be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings, the meeting, namely agenda items 11 to 12, all inclusive. Have a move for that, please.
Happy to move that.
Peter Ewan and Peter Beck.
Into the meeting and operations committee, Tuesday, the 15th of April. Ask for your apologies.
Francois?
Francois? You need to move your apologies.
Yeah, I'll move that.
Mark, negative Peter. Declarations of interest.
I'll declare on Vans Joseph stage 1 and Raymount Blood Wall through MBD. My son being a part owner of that.
Move on to public forum. There's no public forum, this is right?
No.
Right. Confirmation of the minutes. The 18th of March 2025. I had a pretty good look through them. How many?
I'm happy to move.
I'll second it.
Trim Creek.
Right. Mark. Anything arising from the minutes? Okay, that's everything, Mark. Yes, it's ordered, so we'll move on to the actions list. Action list listed, 1 was complete. 2 complete. 3 is complete. 4 is ongoing, was provide a register of known orphan assets to councillors. That's ongoing and it's going to be ongoing for quite some time, I would imagine.
Mr. Chair, just item number 2, that should say the update progress rather than being on. I should have picked that up, sorry.
Action 2,
Yes.
Wanganui rating scheme capital upgrade proposal to be presented to the councillors and to the rating.
Yes.
That was an error, that was in one.
Okay.
So if I could just speak to that one, Mr. Chairman. We obviously had the Wanganui Rating District joint, rating district meeting. We've put to, the rating district the possibility of doing a scheme review. And in the scheme, discuss that, pass some recommendations, but all of that needs to come back to this table now. As do all of the, rating schemes and joint committee papers. And coming back to this table for ratifying. Yeah, because all of those rating schemes and joint committees make recommendations back to this table.
So that can be like next month.
Yeah.
Possibly.
I'm happy to move, Chair, that we will receive a report and items 1 and 3 be deleted and 2 and 3 are ongoing. I'll second that.
Chair's report. We've done quite a few meetings. The Wanganui one was, I felt had a reasonably good outcome for everybody who was there. I felt there's a lot more trust in the communities down there when we first started going down there. It's probably not always the way the outcome was what everybody wanted, but that's what it's about. It's about discussions and having positive conversations. Went to the Buller rating district meeting, which I felt also was quite good. There's a couple of locals spoke there. And I think that it was a reasonably positive outcome, something to build from. And we went to the steering group meeting on the next day. That was, I also thought that was quite positive as well, with the outcome from there. And it's coming to the end of a lot of jobs that we've been getting done. The Resilient Westport stuff is coming to an end, which everybody acknowledges. So we're just probably going to be a good outcome for the public because they've been asking what we're all doing there. And so I guess after the elections, I think that'll all be answered. DIO was quite positive. We need to get our skates on. But I think he was quite impressed with the way that the progress that's been done to date. And I think he's aware of the obstacles that we have. And in such a short time frame, get this sort of stuff on the road. So I think basically all the meetings I went to has sort of had a positive outcome this month. I thought it was quite good. Thanks, Darren. A lot of credit to you.
And the team, Mr. Chairman.
Chair, do we get a result or any knowledge of what happened at the steering?
The minutes come back to the council, don't they, when they get circulated?
So, Mr. Chairman, I can confirm that Resilient Westport minutes are public information once they're ratified. And so, but what I would say, just to support the chairman's comments, and we heard it even at the joint committee meeting, the public are quite confused around the governance around the project, because you've got this table, you've got Buller District Council, you've got the joint committee, and then you've got this thing called the steering group, right? And people just don't understand, who's in charge and who's calling shots and who's doing what, eh? So that was actively discussed at Resilient Westport. We'll let the minutes come out, but that will hopefully be streamlined over the coming months, hopefully post-election. Yeah.
I'll be happy to move the chair's report. Second that.
Reports, the monthly catchment report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just speak to a couple of items and then I'll take questions. So just further to the actions register discussion around the rating districts, those meetings are all concluded and staff are just progressing the actions arising from those that don't require a decision of council, and it's going well. I've noted a couple there that arose from meetings in the southern area, and I'm just confirming that we've reported back to the rating district spokespeople the issues that arose at those meetings. In the previous committee, there was reference to the asset management system work, and an important part of that for our team is the data and inspection part of that. That is progressing really well. On page 25 of your agenda, figure 6, we've summarised progress with the rating district inspections. That was as at beginning of this month, but there's been an increase in the number of inspections completed in the past 2 weeks. So as at yesterday, the number of rating districts for which inspections are completed has increased from 9% to 24%, and those partially inspected has increased from 24% to 38%. So overall, we've got more than 60% of the rating districts are either inspected or partially inspected, which is really great progress. Natural hazards, I won't speak to the strategy and implementation plan piece here because you've got a separate paper later in the agenda. But just note there the issue with respect to LiDAR elevation data for the coast and the significant increase in coverage that's been achieved recently, which is a great outcome. I'll pause there, Mr. Chair, before we move to capital projects and answer any questions that the committee might have.
Any questions, guys? Any of the projects you've outlined on the front part here, Turn Care, Vine Creek?
Just a couple of questions on this query. I noticed the New River's potentially going to be an ongoing problem. I just wonder, with the material shifting capacity as a digger opposed to a bulldozer, what would be quicker? To me, the digger is going to be a lot slower than a bulldozer pushing up the sides to get rid of the water in a situation where we need speed to get the capacity, the water out of the river quicker. I think it's going to be slower in my book, but just a thought.
I'll answer that one, Mark.
Yeah, I do. Just through the chair. From a health and safety point of view, I wouldn't want to be in there in a bulldozer. End of story.
It's a bit unknown.
Through the chair, I understood that you leave a buffer out there so that it's not too big a deal to go and just flick the, you don't leave it open for, until the storm is impending. You have the buffer in front of it ready to go. It's really quite quick to open.
It's not bulldozer material.
Through the chair, you'd need both machines. If you did use a bulldozer, you have to have the excavator, what you're explaining, Chris, to actually open up the final pit, because it'd be unsafe. So you'd end up with 2 lots of transport and
It's quite an unknown to the ground condition.
Yeah.
You break through that top skin, not really sure what's underneath.
Yeah.
I know they did it in the old days with bulldozers, but they probably had 2 or 3 would. Need one to pull one out.
It's on page 39 there, lessons from Moira, they had 5 trigger points of 5. It's any chance of getting those 5, or are they in here? I don't really recognise the 5 conditions that they use.
But why, right?
From why,
Yes.
yeah.
We haven't reproduced those in this paper, but we can provide that information.
And it might be quite useful for us to have a little look, because if that's a working example, that'd be quite useful to capitalise on their hard work.
Can I just make a comment here that the mechanical mouth opening at Wairoa is certainly, it's something that's in their toolbox up there, but that's not going to solve that flooding problem up there. And they're talking about a $70 million fix up there, for structural protection and other things, and because they just can't rely on that mouth being open all the time and even being able to mechanically do it all the time.
I was just thinking something like Karamea, we can have a buffer thing.
Yeah, sure.
Built across there that when you have these 5 or 6 trigger things, that when it meets the necessary conditions, like a forecast that's impending, a river that's rising, that sort of thing, you can just quickly go down and get it operational.
Sure.
One final thing is that I wouldn't mind including the Orawaiti in one of those, somewhere in there as one of the river mouths to investigate as a potential for being able to use the method of having an opening availability. Because why I ask is that when we want to tweak what we're building at the moment, we sometimes have to remodel them, and some of the brand new structures that we've got in place may need to have some little tweaking to bring it up to match what's predicted in the modelling. Whereas there's something like an opening at the Orawaiti, for example, would give you a buffer that would be already wouldn't have to go and tweak existing structures.
So could we take that down as an action? Thanks, Dana, to add Orawaiti to a mouth opening.
Mr. Chair, could I say something through the chair on this? This was previously investigated during the formulation of the proposal, so we could go back and find what were the conclusions of that investigation and present them.
Thank you, Peter.
Through the chair, the New River problem is going to be here for quite some time, and it's not going to go away, and there's no easy solution as far as I can see. For those that's been around a fair while, we will remember that the New River at the moment, as it's shown there, the mouth is going directly out from the New River, extreme to the south almost. But at times, the New River mouth has been as far as almost the regional council out here behind the Parawa store. And I remember it out there, there's a lagoon, there's a pond out there called Flaherty's Pool, which is still a remnant of it. And the New River came past the salt water and then went out there. And there has been numerous times where there's been attempts to put in a rock groin all in the best interests, and that which the sea have just covered up. At one stage, we looked, when I was on the Grey District Council, there was quite a big remnant of the old lagoon outside the Paroa School. And there was investigation into actually putting a bridge across the cycleway and putting a cut out from behind the school. But only in recent times I went down and had a look when we had it, because I regularly check when the mouth's blocked in case there's a flooding issue. And I went down and had a look, and that's all completely filled in. So any attempt to do that at the moment would be a waste of time. The problem of the flooding along the stretch of river from the Paroa Hotel up to here, which affects all these houses, has been really exacerbated by the development on the east side of the railway line, which is the Colson Road area. Anyone's been up through there, quite a lot of housing development and that, and the increase and much further increases on subdivisions and that. So the water is piped out of the roof, from the roofs onto the stormwater systems and directly into the river at a much faster rate. That was quite a big swampy area up there for years, just a massive big swamp. It's all been over the last 20 or 30 years, it's been turned into subdivisions, and now the water's entering into the saltwater lagoon at a much quicker rate. And of course it's building up, and we're also getting the sea, the southerly trends are sort of building up the mouth. So there's no easy solution, and I think this council is going to be faced with regular mouth openings there on that Old Rating District. There's no simple solutions. I would suggest that, any further subdivisions up there should have retention ponds to actually slow that water, which is widespread, from entering the system pretty quick. So that's a problem I think future council is going to be faced with, and there's no easy solution that I can see.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Haddock there. Many years ago when the first one started, the subdivision started up there, a former employee of the regional council, Bernie Gallagher, I think. He got a hold of me and pointed out that very fact. He's now deceased, but he would have rung me 15 years ago and said that same thing. There's been more subdivisions since he raised that concern to where we are now. I agree. What was that?
This, the raising of the stop bank and the Tiamat here, we seem to be making that a complicated process, and it should be reasonably simple, I would have thought. Well, they got
The gravel.
yeah, like they should have 10% increase on a structure, shouldn't it? Like on page 21 here.
Page 21.
Page 21, they're saying that it's gonna have to get a resource, probably going to get resource consent to raise it. And I mean, it's in the middle of the writing's on 21, page 21, and there's a picture of it on page 20.
I think through the chair, I'd been talking to the Rating District spokesperson out there, and was concerned about the quality of the gravel, but the gravel, the Permacar gravel's the best gravel you'll get for compaction, and that's really great gravel. I think the resource consent matter, Andy, relates to the Rating District spokesperson said to me that there is resource consent on a couple of areas, but they were looking at another area that would have taken, I believe, that needed resource consent. So I think that story, Gavin.
I don't have the detail other than the advice we received is it would require resource consent, and that's a consequence of the current plan and our. We've got no choice there.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it's for the gravel tank.
Through the chair, so that material doesn't have to be engineered or anything.
Well, it shouldn't have to. It's stood the test of time already since the 1940s.
Exactly.
So it's the compaction. It's all down to compaction.
Yeah.
And the process. Depending on what sort of gravel you use.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman, I've asked staff to look at that issue in terms of fit for purpose, material and methodology.
Tom, do you want to say something?
That's fine, Mr. Chair, we've moved on from that item.
Well, you can go back. I was trying to get to you, but they kept butting on.
So just going back to the new river
avoiding cutting it. There is a paper on the agenda that discusses this issue in more detail. So that conversation might be more appropriate for that one. And just a note for councillors that weren't in attendance at the committee meeting, there was a paper presented by Paulette about the New River Mouth opening and the issues we're experiencing with that. And the Greymouth Joint Committee endorsed council spending a bit of money on carrying out some further investigations into other options that might be available to us, and that endorsement, that resolution still needs to come back to you guys for approval, as Darryl mentioned before. Thank you.
Darryl, you had to say something?
Yeah, I would like to ask Gavin actually a question around other councils' practices. So I want to come back to the issue that councils have been raising about the subdivisions causing increased and faster runoff, which is actually exacerbating the problem. And the concern is about any further subdivisions will keep adding to that problem and, could create flooding. So Gavin and then perhaps Peter Blackwood, could you just comment what happens in other councils when this concern is presented? Because on the West Coast, we haven't had a lot of this because we haven't had a lot of development, but other councils like Queenstown and things have a lot of development. And this is a fact of life in these other regions with regional councils, and they deal with this every other day. So Gavin and then Peter.
Yes, so Mr. Chairman, other councils would typically take on an advocacy role when it came to the subdivision and are potentially an affected party. So at the time of subdivision, expressing comment and perhaps concern, volunteering conditions around mitigation of stormwater effects. The other role that councils play is even further up that process in terms of land use planning with the district plan and making sure that intense development that has the potential to increase stormwater runoff into channels is managed, mitigated or avoided. So it's really about being very, very involved in that planning process.
Yeah.
By the time it gets to construction stage, it's too late to have an influence.
Thanks. Peter, do you want to comment on that as well?
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't catch that. I'm ready to speak on it. Sorry, I didn't catch the councillor's question, sorry.
No, what comment would you like to make on this matter? Thanks, Peter.
Okay, all cool. Everywhere I've worked in the last few years, Greater Wellington, Horizons Regional Council, Bay of Plenty Regional Council, it is a very major issue, and it, as Kevin has said, we try and address it through the planning stage, through the land rezoning stage. Give an example, Tauranga, Papamoa, absolutely vast development, and they're gradually building themselves a stormwater pond to flood themselves, so it all has to sit in their streets when they get the big flood, and the houses are now designed above the streets. You then get to the stormwater or earthworks consent, and through the regional plans, those always require 100% mitigation of the additionally generated stormwater in the 1% AEP, the 100-year. And that's not only the peak flow, it's also the volume, because in some cases it's the volume. So other councils treat this very, very seriously. Yeah.
No, Peter answered the question.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, thanks Gavin and Peter for that. Hearing that advice, councillors, is there anything you would like staff to do about this?
Well, just from the point of view, others, we need to see if it's addressing the TTG plan, really, isn't it? This is what can be, all the stuff should be focused on there, should it not? And if it's not, well, then it's up to people doing the TTG plan to bring these concerns up, really.
I hate to sound like a dog with a bone, but Organs Island is a classic example of what was originally covered bush and trees is now pretty good farmland, and as a result, the runoff off that is at the top of the catchment, and it has a measurable effect further downstream particularly on the highway design.
Yeah, just a couple of things. What we're referring to, the back of Paroa there, the first subdivision was at the front, the seaward side. So therefore, the culvert was built accordingly to that culvert. Now we've got 2 or 3 behind it. The culvert may be surplus to what the bottom of the water coming off, maybe. Second thing, I'd just like to go to page 35, the Hokitika River situation. There's a comment there in the second paragraph. A report by NIWA found that the southward extending river mouth was not likely to significantly affect flood levels on the Hokitika estuary. Well, that's not correct because I brought it up here before in the past. September the 1st and 2nd, 1947, that's exactly what happened. And that's why Hokitika got the biggest floods they ever had through the township, because it was blocked. Now, you know, the reliability of the predictions only as good as the projection of how long it's good. You put the reverse of that, the reliability of any prediction is only as good as how far back in history you go and just check your facts that you're putting in writing when it's incorrect. Because that's exactly what happened to Hokitika not too many years ago, September 47. So, you know, it's a bit like the repeat of the Kiwi quarry report we had from the experts. They didn't look back far enough what the mining history was underneath. And I've got a couple of comments later on the agenda about the Corsair report, because we're going to pay big money. We want them to be thorough. And you don't go back in history, just check some simple things. There's pages of it in the Great Star about Hokitika really. Not given the dates. All you got to do is go photocopy it, put it in a file. We won't be paying good money for NIWA. Can't cover the river now.
Yeah.
We'll move on from here now, so.
Can I just, because I think this is really important, for Dean's benefit, I wonder if I could articulate an action, because I think that's what we need around New River. So the action is for West Coast Regional Council engineering and planning staff to review what provisions are in the TTPP around subdivision. And also engage with Grey District Council staff around future subdivisions and land use zoning issues that could exacerbate flooding.
Through the chair, that needs to be decided with the local council too, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
They need to be in hand with building consents and subdivision.
Correct.
I think with any river.
Do you want to move for that action?
No.
No.
I think before we move on, just to make one comment on, it's going to be very hard to manage any cuts in the river on any preparatory work. You'd be better off to save your money and put it ready to go, have the consents in place. That's just my opinion. And so we've got river monitoring now, we've got weather forecast. We should be able to just about tell what the trigger points. I know Saltwater's got them already. They should know basically when they need to go and just go on and get it done.
Beyond standard.
Or you could cut through really low and be gone tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yes. You know, I know it's, yeah, okay, we'll move on.
Thanks.
Okay.
Moving on to catchment.
Yeah, capital projects.
Yeah.
Yeah, 27.
No.
Natural hazards.
We haven't moved any of those reports yet.
Okay, so was this first report, monthly catchment report? We'll move for that.
Yeah, I'll leave that.
Receive the report.
Yep.
Seconded, Andy. Moving on to the management of the river mouth.
Trying to keep it
You still got to get capital project first. You can't leave that yet.
from page 26.
Yep. Take your time reading these ones.
Capital projects.
27.
I'm on to this.
One page.
Yep, Gavin's going to speak for
Oh,
us. Yep.
so I'll hand over to,
Talking, so.
sorry, yes.
We're looking for a resolution, sorry.
Nick Blackwood.
Oh, yeah.
Which is getting project
Okay.
update.
Okay, right.
Okay, through the chair, council members, chief executive and other staff. This report I wrote on the 28th of March, and a few things have happened since then. So I'll update as we go. I'm just saying continual favourable progress has occurred. There's a note in my intro that we've expanded at pace into the initial design of the Lower Buller, North End and Eastons Road, and I have proposals in front of me for the Lower Buller and North End, and they're liable to be commissioned either this week or next. Those are mainly for the geotech investigations. We have a ProDrill coming with their drill on the week starting the 28th of April. So you'll see some work on the ground there in those places, and we will be issuing the appropriate media releases on that. As you can see, a nice photo taken by Gerald Haitley himself of his stop bank. A very, very good job. Totally done. We're still considering whether we will do some overlays to mitigate uplift. We have, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, we have a very, very good peer reviewer of the geotechnical design, Dr. Marianne O'Halloran, and she's going to later on another meter talking about the bylaws things. And I had hoped that we might have the overlay sorted, but her husband's had a brain bleed. He was in hospital last night again, and but she is second to none in the assessment of geotechnical issues for stop banks. We have, of course, employed very good consultants, but it's good having Marianne. Buller River upstream of the bridge. I'm not going to really talk about that except to say the steepage and stability modelling is now proceeding. And what is missing is that I've designed the rock to protect the land by the O'Connor home that is designed. It is big rock, just a bit bigger than Gary Williams' design at Organs and Kawateri. The outside of bend velocity 6.9 meters per second, and I know all councillors here will know that rivers travel very fast on the west coast. I think definitely the fastest in New Zealand, fastest I've encountered. Floating Lagoon, Davis Ogilvy are working on the final geotechnical design report, and we're doing detailed assessments on the contamination from the previous use as a railway through there and how that might be mitigated. Avery's, the design is completed. Yay, we can give that a clap. I'm glad to see it's completed. And shortly we'll be lodging our resource consent. It does have a small impact for maybe 6 months on some houses of 5 to 10 centimetres because water can still get across. Unbelievable as it may seem, I think Councillor Cole and others wouldn't not an experience with water have come across in the Floating Lagoon because it was a 60-year, but Matt Gardner's modelling shows in 100-year it will get across there. So that's a small issue we're dealing with, and so when you put the stop bank up, it has a 5 to 10 centimetre increase in the 1%. Conversely, in the 2% AEP, the 50-year, and this is because we've built McKenna's, there's a decrease in flood levels for most properties. So overall, it's a win for a period. So that resource consent application is being assembled, and we're also, once we're pretty close to that, we'll also be calling tenders on this job. Right. The next ones, I've said the Lower Buller, North End, Lower Orowaji. We're working at pace on getting preliminary engineering reports and getting the geotech investigations scoped. I've got good proposals on those which I am addressing at present. Carter's Beach, well, Matt Gardner of Land River Sea has been modelling the bridge at 2D to see whether the proposed mitigation works there do mitigate the 7 centimetres rise at the bridge from this, and currently it looks like it's about equal. So it would be important for us to continue to engage with NZTA, and they were aware of this issue. They noted it their representative at the rating scheme meeting noted it, so it's noted there at high levels. Snodgrass they're still working on funding options and the use of the adaptation fund. So for Chief Executive Darryl, I think I'll leave it at that point. I'm happy to take any questions.
Peter? Thanks, Peter, for that report. At the steering group meeting, joint meeting in Westport, Councillor Cummings brought up quite a good idea on the Buller River upstream of State Highway 67, which was rather than completing that works, because I know it's subject to flooding downstream at Carter's, but Councillor Cummins suggested that perhaps that wall could be built to a certain level, you know, and I thought that was a very good idea. I just wonder if, you know, you were in, I know I don't want to comment on whether you're going to do it or not, but whether that would be an option looking forward to get some of that work underway and get done.
I am going to discuss this with the modeler. I think the thing is, every QMEC you shut out from crossing the upper Buller into the town has to go somewhere else. And whether you build it to a certain level, and it might be a de minimis non-current lax effect at Carter's, we could look at that. The other issue, of course, is efficiency and impact on costs. Now, I'm certainly not dismissing that option, but and for Councillor Cumming too, I am going to address that with Matt Gardner, see what he thinks, because he was intimately involved with the design of this scheme. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yep, thank you. Yeah, I think it's a good idea to investigate it, because it could, some of the work done, it's quite a major part of mental base.
Yeah.
Through the chair, thanks for the report, Peter. Just a couple of questions. And I think councillors could help out here, myself and probably Councillor Haddock and Councillor Cole. Going with KiwiRail, there's probably 2 or 3, maybe 4 KiwiRail bits that need tidying up there to make some of that flooding complete.
Yeah.
The quickest one I can think of is the Cats Creek extension, which to me is, from a contractor's point of view, is pretty basic and straightforward, but it just needs consent from KiwiRail to go right up to that embankment. Stage 2 would be Stevens Road clean out of approach to KiwiRail, and are quite keen to go forward with what the existing infrastructure that's there to clean out. But I think for the greater good of the whole scheme through the adjacent landowner, if we could investigate further through myself, Councillor Haddock and probably Councillor Cole, and have an on-site meeting fairly well up the food chain from KiwiRail to look at those box culverts. But it's yeah, so and of course there's other adjacent land up further. I won't mention any names, but the farmer further up on the northern flood wall, up the 9 Mile, also
the 9 Mile.
It's also got to be locked into KiwiRail infrastructure. So there's probably 4 or 5, I think, occasions.
There is one more.
engaged.
There is one more. Sorry to interrupt. I'm really sorry. There is one more. It's the KiwiRail land from the bridge down to on the way to Western Mineral Sands. And we're fortunate that they own quite a bit of land through there. We're fortunate that our consultants that we are shortly to engage for the geotech on there are also the consultants to KiwiRail on that land.
Good.
And we need to know, like, we're not planning to build that straight away, but with KiwiRail, we've learnt that you've got to engage early. And certainly we need to engage now. I agree on the clean out of the culverts in Cats Creek, and also 9 Mile, and there's one other up there.
Councillor Haddock and myself and Cole can help to assist to
Thank you.
keep us moving. Yeah.
And if I could just speak to that, we have got a date set with the KiwiRail now.
We had?
Yep, we've got a date set with their technical paperwork in the coming weeks, after our meeting the other day.
Good.
Stephen.
Brilliant. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to comment on this Kiwi Rail matter more generally, you know, with the whole of the scheme. So just confirming there is a meeting locked in on the specifics at Stevenson Road, right? And only that. But the scheme actually intersects with Kiwi Rail right across a lot of points in the scheme. So what I've asked staff to do is to draw up a table. We've broken down the scheme into 8 sections, and each of those 8 sections will report on, from a design point of view, what we know now of where the scheme intersects, what the issues are with Kiwi Rail. I do agree the first 2 cabs off the rank is the closing of the Cats Creek and then there's the road, but there are other points in the scheme that intersect with Kiwi Rail.
Great.
Some of that we know in detail and what we need to do there. Some of it we don't know yet because we don't know exact alignments, but we know we may have some impact on Kiwi Rail or need some approvals from Kiwi Rail. What I would like to do is take you up on your offer, Councillor McIntyre, with Councillor Haddock and Councillor Cole, is once we've got that table with all of those intersections right across the whole scheme, is to seek quite a senior level meeting with Kiwi Rail to early to talk about all of these intersections with the scheme and actually get a senior level leadership over that, because after that it actually goes into 3 or 4 different bits of Kiwi Rail which we would really like to be joined up on. So that's what I'd like to do there. And I know that particularly Councillor McIntyre, Councillor Haddock have got some very good contacts, senior level in Kiwi Rail that could broker that meeting for us. And that would be very much appreciated. Thank you.
Yep. Through the chair, to follow up from that, Darryl, also that Kiwi Rail needs to know that we're also protecting their asset along with Westport. So it's just not us wanting something from Kiwi Rail, we're helping protect their asset as well. And the town for the roll on.
Yeah, just a question for Peter. Peter, if you could just expand a little bit for me for clarity. You mentioned that for every cubic metre lift on, say, a stop bank or placement in a riverbed, that water has to go somewhere. Now,
Correct.
is that equally applicable to small rivers and big rivers, no matter what the water core?
Yeah, unless it's going into an off-channel storage, which would deflate it, and there's no off-channel storages here. So you could generally assume that maybe if you shut out a cubic, 80 to 85% of it will be retained in the river. That would be pretty much the norm. And the other 15 to 20% will go to the opposite bank and travel down that side. So
Okay,
it's, yeah.
Well, no, thanks.
Through the chair, I've just got one more question for you, Peter, and it's Snodgrass. The time frame, so the main, well, should you say stalling, but the hold at that stage is basically some of the preliminary design work's done, but we're looking at modelling for basically funding, aren't we?
Correct. We're waiting for funding. It's convoluted. It depends on how their adaptation fund is applied. But in the end, like that 2.36 million project, well, I can't say too much at this stage because it actually is behind closed doors. But
I fully understand that. Yep.
Yeah.
No, thank you, Peter. Thank you.
Right. Ready to move on?
Thanks, Brent.
I've just got one question for the cross sections for the Turamaka River for the Turamaka Rating District. How have we getting on with that?
I don't have the detail, Mr. Chairman, but I'll come back to you afterwards on that.
It's something that we've asked.
I'll follow up on that.
Any other ones, any other rivers? We'll move on. The recommendation is we receive the report, very thorough one, I must admit. Creating a lot of discussion. You gonna move it for that?
I'll move that.
No, we can move it. We've done that.
Yeah.
No, we're still talking about it.
We're after this one now.
Okay, management of river mouth openings. The recommendations committee resolved, received the report, endorse the proposed program of work for improving the operational management of the river mouths. Note that parts of the program are subject to future decisions of council regarding scope, funding and priorities.
Chair, I can happy to speak for that if you'd like. So this paper came out of the Resource Management Committee meeting in October, where you saw more information about how river mouth openings work and what a program of work would look like. So what we've done here is scoped up a program of work, the intention of seeking your endorsement to go away and develop more detail around timing and cost, because some of these things, or many of these things, are not actually budgeted. So we would come back to you in 2 months' time with a more detailed program across all of these activities, which are intended to make river mouth openings more, to be more enabling, if you like, enable us to be more responsive, whilst at the same time avoiding or mitigating environmental effects and doing it safely. So there are many things that we can do ahead of an event that will achieve that, which are gaps at the moment. And we've listed those on page 45, which is the principal part of the paper, which lists 10 parts of the program, which starts with engaging with the territorial authorities to clarify and confirm respective roles and responsibilities, because at the moment, this isn't the only organisation that does river mouth openings. So that's a conversation that needs to be had around scope. Developing SOPs and methodologies for the work we do, so formalising that. Improving the monitoring, and also, as Councillor Cole has indicated, improving the trigger levels, adding trigger levels for our rivers. And then considering some changes to the coastal plan, which would be incorporated into the imminent review of the plan, which would make this more enabling, again, without, by avoiding or mitigating environmental effects. At the moment, it is quite constraining. And as Councillor Ewan has noted, the Hokitika River is a river that we would seek to be added to the community activity list as well. So as I said, what we're looking from you today is endorsement of this program that we would take away and flesh out in more detail and bring back to you in 2 months' time. That question.
Questions for Kevin on this? Yeah, will be concerned.
No, I'm very happy with the report, and I'm very happy the recommendation is recommending option 2, which is on page 46, that will endorse the proposed improvement program. That's as so I think that's a proper option rather than the direct staff to make. So I think that's a recommendation. So I'm happy to move that way. If you want to second that.
You're going to second that? Option 2?
Yep.
Option 2, Chris?
Yep.
Peter, you?
No, I have 2 minds, because we don't know the funding implications. And option 1 is working at the moment. Bear in mind that staff weren't aware of some of these opening rivers that I sent that report through. That may be reflective of, 66% staff only been here less than 2 years. Okay, that's improving as we go along, but I would like to see some more detail on the funding before I went with option 2. Be sticking with option 1.
Yeah, option 2, as long as we get some practical solution. Yeah, option 2.
Pretty much option 2 too, really, but the thing I liked about trying to get a global consent. Do you want to put those details?
I could speak to that initially, the chief executive might wish to add.
Gavin's been through this
Okay,
before as well, so much more recently than I have.
Yes, so global consent is referenced at bullet point 6, page 45. At this stage, we're simply saying to consider it.
Yeah.
And when we come back, if you choose option 2, come back in 2 months with what would a global consent application cost and the time frame, and some commentary on whether it will be successful or not. They are quite complex. Because they're global, they lack the specificity that sometimes the consent authority is looking for. So what you can find is you end up effectively developing a whole lot of individual consents bundled globally. And so, or you end up with a situation where when it comes to implementation, there's a lot of detail to be provided before you give effect to it. That's why the preference would be to achieve a permitted activity status, probably. But again, at this stage, no decisions around any of that. It's just considering these as options and then come back to recommendations about the best way forward.
Part of our coastal plan.
Can I?
Look, I will just comment, so there is a number, as given a set a number of approaches here. One is to try and achieve a permitted activity status in the plan, but that was rejected last time by all the parties and only accepted for some and not all. If we were to go for a global consent or even individual consents, it is highly likely that the regulatory part of this organisation, it's probably not even highly likely, it will happen. There'll be at least a limited notification to the Department of Conservation, given it's in the coastal plan area, and NZCPS will apply, as well as iwi, and that brings us right back around to why it wasn't as permitted activity in the plan in the first place, because they wanted to see individual consents that dealt with the individual ecological issues and mouth opening issues on each of them individually, which was what never got done 10, 15 years ago, and while we're in this situation. So let us work through that. I promote to you option 2 as councillors, and let us work through that and bring that back.
Through the chair, just a question for you, Gavin. So under emergency works, does that override that or not?
The emergency works should be used sparingly.
For emergencies?
They're intended to be used for emergencies. They're not intended to be used for things that are reasonably foreseeable. And this is all reasonably foreseeable. The expectation would be that we would go through a process like this to hold the necessary consents or have rules in a coastal plan, rather than arguing that it's an emergency. So that should be used very, very sparingly.
Probably should have worded it different. So if it was a river mouth that's closing, we didn't have consent for, there was an event in the backcountry, even though we haven't got consent for that river mouth, that could be done under emergency works, if it had to be.
Okay. Well, I'll have a go at answering that. One of the tests to invoke section 330 of the RMA is whether it poses immediate risk to life or property. Okay, so that's one level of test that you need to apply to an Act 330, right? So it can't just be a nuisance.
No. Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
Through the chair, if the civil defence emergency's been declared, then and there is a threat to both life and or property, then the Civil Defence Act is actually very, very powerful, and you could actually justify it and not have any comeback on the decision to
So just
carry it.
because you've given.
Only if an emergency, if a civil emergency has been
Probably
declared.
too late at that stage.
So I think
That's sometimes.
And anticipated if you see something like this, you say backcountry forecast saying it's going to, cause a threat to life, and the normal services can't cope.
well, that comes back to the question for Gavin and Darryl. Would we be better off going through and putting in a series of trigger points for this thing? I mean, rather than going for the whole blown consent, we had trigger points to say at the lagoons, say the Okariri Lagoon rose, and we know that's going to go through the houses. But we better to have that rather than trying to have a consent, then you could use the emergency S330 or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think we probably need both. I think we need the consents to enable us to do what we can reasonably foresee. But I think you make a very good point, which is our SOP needs to give our staff some guidance around what are the circumstances in which we might consider it to be a genuine emergency, and section 330 might apply. And as the Chief Executive has said, it comes down to issues of imminency and also scale, and what is one person's emergency may not actually be an emergency. But we need some good guidance internally to help us make that decision about whether we would exercise that authority. And we don't have that at the moment.
No, it's just if you wait for a civil emergency, there's a whole lot going on, and possibly trying to organise all that with other rivers and roads and stuff, it could be too late.
Yes, so section 330 can be exercised not in a civil defence context. It doesn't require a declaration or like a civil defence emergency. It's using emergency probably in a different context, if you like.
And
Okarita did have, well, the Western District Council did have a consent for Okarita, but it's expired, isn't it? I've read somewhere. So they may be vulnerable at the moment.
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's why we're saying the start point for this is that discussion with the territorial authorities around being really clear on respective roles and responsibilities, because it is actually this council's primary responsibility for this kind of activity and the Soil Conservation Risk Control Act.
And I think like they open that quite regularly, you know. Like just
You know,
annually it'd be open.
It's been open since Okarita was established. Andy, as you know, because they used to dig it by hand. Because the lagoon would come up and flood the township, so it was dug by hand in the early days. I read, lots of writings about it, but now it's essential because it does flood a lot of the properties in there unless it is open, so it needs that consent. But I think a lot of it through the chair too is having the systems in place so that there's a consent to do it, as you're sort of suggesting under option 2, but also a plan of having a number of contractors that and having all their numbers and their emergency numbers and their standby person, so that if it happens on a long weekend at Easter, you actually know that you can contact 2 or 3 contractors, and you've got their alternative numbers because people go on holidays. And the same that goes for the staff that are looking at the trigger levels. We don't expect staff to be here 24 hours a day, 360 days a week. So it's a matter of having the system in place that there is a principal person inspecting those trigger levels, but there's also 2 or 3 backups for when we get, because invariably we get a lot of these events over long weekends or holidays, and that's where a vulnerable part is. So the system doesn't need a lot, and it's a matter of having those systems in place. But I support the item 2, option 2. I think Councillor Ewan's concern is, I'll be happy to move that. Yep, I think Councillor Ewan's concern is the cost, but some of it actually says in here, a lot of it can be done as part of business as usual through initiatives already underway or funded through review of the coastal plan. But I'd just be interested to know what part of Councillor Ewan's sake that there's actually that needs additional funding.
So, if, for example, you were minded to go to a global consent, that would cost money. That was not budgeted. So you'd need to work out whether that was a course of action you wish to take. The other thing about these actions is they will be sequenced and prioritised. So some of these things might, for example, start monitoring and build up some monitoring record over a number of years. And then at that point in time, consider whether or not it might be a consent. There's enough information gathered to be specific about it. So if you choose option 2, when staff come back in a couple of months, we would look at how we prioritise the program and sequenced it. But, there are a number of these things that are currently unfunded. We will bring costs back.
Given the answer to your questions, I'm happy to move.
I'll second that. I've got one more question for you, Kevin, to follow on through the chair, to follow on through Councillor Haddock. I think that at least need to be at least 3 contacts in every district to be notified and have all 3 contracts backed up. Yep, 100%.
We just moved it. Right, seconded it.
Yep.
So option 2 to endorse the proposed improvement program. I won't read out the whole thing. All in favour? Move on. Kids,
Yeah, do you want to record
you want to
that?
record you against?
Yeah.
Hello. Move on to page 52, natural hazard mitigation strategy.
I can speak to that. And I should note I'm speaking to you as a person that prepared the strategy and implementation plan, which was a piece of work that was commissioned by council last year. And so I'm speaking to you as the author of that.
So Gavin's company is Corsair Consulting.
And so the work was substantially completed by Christmas last year prior to me taking up the acting role more recently. So we've made reference to this piece of work in the monthly reports of the last few months. And what we have before you is the final product being brought to you for endorsement. There are two things in your pack. The first is the strategy document itself. And then the second document is an implementation plan or an action plan, which sets out how the strategy will be delivered over the next 10 years and the specific actions. As we've noted in the report, it's primarily fulfilling this council's responsibilities under the Resource Management Act, but it's also helping fulfil other responsibilities such as the Land Information Memoranda process under the Local Government and Official Information Meetings Act, and also your responsibilities under the Soil Conservation and Rivers Control Act. So there are multiple statutes that require natural hazards information in order to make decisions. And what the strategy seeks to do is provide a framework for not only the information that should be gathered, but also how it's made available to users, including the public. There's really only three parts of it that you need to look at, and those are included in the committee report, the 3 diagrams, and I'll speak to those. The first one is at Appendix A on page 56, and that is the SWOT analysis. So that's the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And that sets the scene for the rest of the strategy. So that's the coloured 4 boxes. There are many strengths within the organisation, and I've listed 4 of them there. One of them is a commitment already to plan improvement, and you've already, at the previous committee, talked a little bit about that. A commitment to a fit-for-purpose spatial platform for GIS. That is quite critical. There's also a significant amount of really valuable information held within the organisation, and that's largely because of the catchment board origins of the organisation. That information is hugely valuable. And you also have very strong community and ratepayer engagement and relationships, particularly through the rating district. On the other hand, there are a number of weaknesses that defeat the strengths partially. And the principal one there is that systems and processes are relatively poor for storing information and accessing it. It's quite hard to get hold of information, including for your staff. There are many places where you can find bits of information, but no one place where you can find everything. And to date, there hasn't been an organisation-wide forward program for resolving those issues around content and systems, but the strategy and implementation plan are intended to address them. There's also many opportunities. And so the recent natural hazards events across New Zealand have heightened community awareness in this, and I see that as an opportunity. And there's also many others who are gathering information external to your organisation at no cost to your ratepayers. That's also an opportunity to exploit. In terms of threats, there is risk and litigation here if this is not done properly, and the strategy is intended to help manage that risk for you. And one of the other challenges, and it's probably relatively unique to this region, is just a dynamic physical environment, meaning that the information you gather quickly becomes outdated. It doesn't become less valuable, but it just means you've got this commitment to ongoing measurement and information gathering. So that SWOT analysis sets the scene for natural hazards information here at Council. And then the strategy diagram sets out the problem, and that's the diagram on page 57. It summarises the current problem as Council's got a significant amount of information on the hazards of the West Coast region. However, that information is difficult for the public, stakeholders and Council to access, and it's not fully known what information exists. There are known gaps of information which need to be addressed to support community resilience, and there's no comprehensive organisation plan for addressing that. So that's the problem statement. And if we turn it into a vision, that's the blue box on page 57, the vision is that the public, stakeholders and Council includes you, have ready access to quality information on all relevant natural hazards for all exposed communities in the West Coast region. So that's what the strategy is intended to deliver. And then at the right-hand side of that diagram are 5 objectives, in boxes, and then a set of measures that we use to track achievement of those objectives over time. So that's the strategy. And then the final document, and it's split across 2 pages, is the implementation plan for action plans. And what you have there is a set of work streams arranged in, not in any particular priority order, but work streams that have been grouped according to those 5 objectives. And then across the diagram are the next 10 years. And in each of those pink or blue bars shows how those work streams are being delivered in that 10-year period. And if you look at it, you'll see that in the current year, which is that first column, there are very few work streams because you are already constrained by the budget. You've already made decisions there, so there's no additional work there. And then in years 2 and 3, it ramps up a little bit. Again, isn't it there to keep it within your long-term plan resource levels? But then in the out years, years 4 to 10, that's when it ramps up a bit. And that will require more resource than you currently have. But that's a decision for the future in terms of the next long-term plan. I think I'll leave it to Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, the first one, obviously. Just want to ask Daryl about, is this part of our long-term plan? Do we have to come up with more funds to implement this? I understand it's a, it's of a job for a lot, it's obviously a good idea. I think it's a good idea, but we've got a lot of other stuff coming through at the moment. We've got the type 15 plan, got change the resource management, we've got all sorts of stuff. I'm personally, I'm okay with it, but it's just, I don't want to be taking funds out of something else to try and put this on. But well, I mean, you can put this going on in the background, I guess I don't know. That's at all possible.
So, Mr. Chairman, the implementation plan, that's the one with all the bars on it, deliberately puts substantive new activity into the next long-term plan for that reason, so that you as a council can weigh up these priorities against all your other priorities, okay? So this document is intended to inform those discussions and decisions that you'll make in the future. If you look at the first column, what's in the current year, those are things that are either underway at the minute or scoping exercises to help inform those decisions in subsequent years. Ideally, some of these things would be done sooner, but this recognises that the long-term plan. And there are other priorities, and those are future decisions of council around how this compares to all of those other priorities that you
have. I guess, we don't know the changes or what the TTPP is going to end up finally looking like. RMA is the same. So you're pretty much saying that we can change year on year, Gavin, and be nimble about it. Is that what you're saying?
You can be nimble with the implementation plan. That can be moved around. Things can be altered in terms of timing to some degree without invalidating the strategy, which is the vision and the objective. What I would say is that this focuses on the information piece, and regardless of the new form of the environmental planning law and the repeal of the Resource Management Act, those new laws still have natural hazards provisions. They still require information. So this is not really changed by those changes happening in government at the moment. In fact, it's probably reinforced because it's said that there'll be national direction on natural hazards, and that will require information.
Other question was going to be, would be once the one district plan comes in, will the other councils be contributing some of the costs towards this? Is there going to be direct beneficiaries of this proposal?
So, Mr. Chairman, if I could comment. So the first comment I'd make, in addition to what Gavin has said, is give you an absolute assurance that for the next couple of years, until we hit year 3 of the LTP, which is where you sort of revisit your whole 10-year plan again, that we're doing everything in the strategy and implementation plan to existing resources and existing budget. So nothing new here. Okay, so the types of investment that you've heard about this morning from Blair about the redo of the GIS system is an enabler that makes this happen. We need that, and we get rid of West Maps and all that sort of thing. You would have seen, you recall, councillors, that the Operations Committee report, monthly report. You've been getting periodic updates from our natural hazards analyst, Sharon Hornblow, who talks about the release of the hazard information to the district councils and pairing all that up. So that's all going to keep going on. What this plan does say, though, is that you've got some choices and some recommendations that you need to consider for those councils that we hear in year 3 of the LTP to think about and weigh up against our other imperatives and other calls on money. It is right that the last question you posed there, councillor, is that hey, we are doing this to provide information for all the other 3 councils on the coast, and you know, how should that be paid for? Is a good question. Thanks.
Well, I'd just like to comment, I fully endorse the recommendations, and you know, your background is that West Coast Regional Council is extensive natural hazard information, but is hard to access, incomplete, lacks a comprehensive plan. Vision natural hazard strategy is to ensure easy access to quality, user-friendly information on all relevant natural hazards for all communities in the West Coast region, and that's our responsibility. And if I may, you know, give an example, no one likes to have hazard overlays or maps on their properties, but the realism is, if you're a property owner, you need to know that hazard exists for you, whether you like it or not. You need to know. And the problem is, and I've seen that example in a previous council, where someone burst into a council meeting and started yelling and screaming that they bought a property, and it didn't show that it was in a flood zone, and it wasn't easily accessible, and they were screaming and yelling, wanting action, you know. And so, you know, it's a responsibility we've got to identify. The staff have made a good job. This is a long-term plan strategy, as Given said, and it's going to carry on with little cost at the next couple of years, but it's essential carrying on that provides information to the TPP. So I fully support it.
Couple of comments. Agree, Gavin, with your options 1 and 2. Just have a couple of questions on the bibliography that you've done. Over 15 years ago now, 16, 17 years, council engaged John Bean. He resided with this council for a number of months, and he went through all the flood situations, all the landslide situations from the coast, and he made a comprehensive report. I sent some of that around to councillors a while back. I had the PS PDF. I just question that I've gone through your biblical and there's no mention of that document. And that document, to me, with the point of location and flood landslides overlaid on a map of the complete West Coast, you'd have it finger pointed where these hazards are, because they are hazards, they resulted in events. We haven't got any volcanic hazard as a natural hazard. We have the sea hazard. We have, to a lesser extent, we have the lake and landslide hazard. You know, hopefully it's not as big as the one in Alaska in 1958, or it was 1,500 metres high wave. Whilst a lot of people think of tsunami as a sea event, it does happen in lakes, but there's another name for it, Cease, is it? Cease or something? Yes, it's a technical name. But I just hope that we're not reinventing the wheel for a lot of stuff that we've already got on big, because we pay good money of that too. But again, I just point out the fact that it may be historical thing if it's over 15 years ago. And we've had that staff that wouldn't have that institutional knowledge of that report, but we had one sitting around here too. It wasn't till 1988, I think it was. I've seen it somewhere. And of course, I emailed you that other one, the updated one, or not near as complete. So, also, I'll go along with the things here. I just think we do have to look back on what this council may have in documentation, because it's easy to say we haven't done anything or we're deficient, but really we have done things in the past that added to the parcel of what you've done here. And we want it to be wholesome. We want it to be the complete package. And if we drop something off, well, we all leave ourselves open. Well, someone's going to remember one day, well, didn't you have a report? You double up the money spending. Historical events remain that. They don't change with passing time. We should be including them because that's where we find out if they haven't.
Yes, the organisation's got a significant amount of really valuable information. For example, what you've referred to, Councillor Ewan, the problem is getting your hands on it. And so one of the early things to do is to collate what we already know before we commission new staff. And you'll see on the implementation plan, it's a bit hard to read, but the second bar down, number 2, information for past flood events in the current year, scoping what exists, and then collating, digitising and uploading layers and reports into a system to make it more accessible to staff and to external people. And once that's done, then it's a matter of, well, what do we not already know and might wish to commission in the future? In terms of the bibliography and the strategy, that's not complete. So this work didn't go through and do that collation exercise. That was outside scope, but it said that collation exercise needs to happen, and there are different ways of delivering that over the next few years.
I know, just make a comment to the chair on the electrification, like what Price said, in the Merchant earthquake, Braemouth had that, Stair Avenue, Blaketown. I've seen photographs of it. I think the Grey Star, we might have had them there. Buller, Calmare had electrification too. Not the extent Christchurch had, but we had it. So it is a risk. To say that may or may not happen, I think it's always going to be a risk. Reclaimed land, for sure. So,
Andy?
I didn't see Lake Ianti as a risk until I read that yesterday. I got a tsunami out of the lake.
I know Lake Brunner had one. When that bank came down, there wasn't that long ago, a few years ago, wasn't it? And the wave was right across the lake. But anyway, we'll move on. The recommendation is the committee resolved to receive the report, endorse the natural hazard information strategy, implementation plan, note the strategy implementation plan will develop on the draft 27-37 long-term plan.
We'll have to move that.
Peter, second Peter Ewan. All those in favour? Right, move on to number 9. Number 9, that's the door. I guess. Is it? Don't chose the state of operation committee.
I thought probably not doing 8.4. Scott.
Don't forget me.
Oh,
Sorry, Chantel.
You can't forget me.
Hi, Chantal.
We're on page 142.
Yeah, sorry.
So-
142.
142.
Right? Yeah. No.
I just. Oh, no, a lot of reading, wasn't it? 8.4, review of financial and resilience balances. The recommendation is to receive the report and note the review of the Wanganui Rating District reserves balance will be completed by 30th of June 2025, being the end of year 24-25 financial year. I can tell. You speak to that.
Yep, so this paper was taken to the Wanganui Rating District and, the attachments were, and we're talking about the review that I've been undertaking. The review is going really well, and with possibly 1 or 2 more meetings with the Rating District Committee, we'll have this closed out before the year end. One win that we had on the 31st of March, I attended a meeting with Nima and some other teammates from the council, and it was confirmed that there is no expiration date on lodging claims with NEMA, which is a great result for council to know and for the rating district, as there is a, based on my review, it looks like the event at Percy's Bank has never been claimed for. So I'm working through that, and we'll have more information and be able to talk to the rating district committee on progress. In addition to that work, I'm working through various invoices, and it also appears that some of the capital works, because Wanganui is a maintenance scheme only, so historically it looks like we haven't been invoicing the landowners in agreed proportions for capital related works, and I'm working through that with the rating district committee, and we'll work through that with the landowners as well. Any questions?
Questions, anyone? Good knowledge to know.
Good work. Chantel.
Yeah, very good.
Yep, no, I agree too. It's
Oh,
a
the,
good outcome, and that we've confirmed the NEMA, and that could be a chance to claim, maybe offset to the cost of those affected landowners, you know, and you know, it's just one of these historic issues we've been left to sort out, you know, but you know, thank goodness now we're going forward to no work that'll be done, no capital work will be done without scheme, on any scheme without the landowners agreeing in writing prior to, so great work on the
And-
NEMA
and
front there,
Awesome.
Chantel, it's awesome, so hopefully that might alleviate some of the cost going forward.
well, the rating scheme won't be so broke.
Yeah, well, the thing that's been happening is there's been a mixture of maintenance works and capital works that have been taking place. And because we haven't invoiced landowners, the reserve balance looks a bit sick. But once we unpick what's maintenance versus capital and then invoice landowners in the agreed proportions, that then just triggered as income and it boosts the reserves essentially.
Andy?
That's the only problem is we haven't really got any agreed proportions.
Yeah, the agreed
Problem.
proportions. So I've gone through and I'm identifying individual invoices and areas where the work's taken place. And then we will meet with the rating district committee and who are best placed to know who are the affected landowners and in what proportion. So that's conversations to still be had.
So is there any indication yet, Chantel, about the contribution from NEMA? Because we'll still have to pay 40%, won't we, or
No,
the rating district will?
it's different. So because the claim will be under $1 million for the Percy Bank, we don't trigger our third-party insurance. So that's through Aon, through our brokers, but we are still able to claim the 60% through NEMA. So with NEMA, there is an excess there, and that is based on 0.002% of the capital value of the whole of the West Coast Rating District. So it will be an exercise there. So I'll have to do that calculation and then work out how much. Yeah. Yeah, it's for the whole coast capital value, not just for Wanganui. I clarified that with my in the meeting with NEMA. And then we'll work out what that deductible is and what the amount of work at Percy Bank was, and then the difference will be what we can claim.
Should you say that percentage again for us?
It's 0.002% of capital value.
So it's 0.002.
Over
0002.
Point
20.
002.
in the capital value.
Oh, that's just under 1/4%, is it?
Hell no.
0.25. So that's over the whole value of all our assets,
002.
which is what,
Oh, the
70 odd
capital
million.
value, and that'll be it's in the annual report, so I need to go back and work it out because it will be the capital value at the time of,
This is
I think, at the time of the event.
So that's always going to be on an NEMA claim.
It's 0.002.
And that,
right.
Sorry, Peter, just
200 bucks.
Yeah, that's just that.
210K for 2024.
Excuse me, could you repeat that?
210K for 2024-25.
Bird nesting money for you. Ian.
So I think what happens
Let it
is
fall.
because I'll have to check with them, but I think because the event happened a number of years ago, I'm not clear if that percentage applies to the capital value at the time of the event. But there's still a couple of things that we need to work through.
So we're actually coming back on the 30th of June. It's going to be all followed up saying that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look forward to
Yeah.
that. I don't think anyone's arithmetic sounds that good.
No. Too many zeros.
I'll leave that up to you, Chantal.
I use Excel.
$2 per 100.
Right.
Oh, leave the new wish sports scheme.
Yeah,
Oh.
you don't want to pay for that, do you?
Bump it up.
Yeah, what a bump that.
$20 per million.
$20. Yeah.
To off capital value.
Hey, $20 per million.
$20 per million.
$2 per 100,000.
Well, it's going to be buggers all.
Depends how many million.
We'll need $1 billion.
Right, we'll move on. The recommendations to receive the report. Note the review of the Wanganui Rating District's reserves balance will be completed. So,
Yep.
move for that.
I'll move that.
Martin McDowell. Seconded Andy Campbell.
Yeah, so you.
We'll go for PDO, no?
Yep.
Councillor Campbell. He's conflicted. Voted his, conflicts.
That's the rule. No, we've just got.
Yep.
Book the rain with.
Yeah.
So basically, we're just going to receive the reports, aren't we? Yep.
That's two.
Oh,
Morning, Scott.
Morning, Scott.
How are you?
157?
Madam?
156. Yeah, 156, 156.
156, 115, yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Prince Joseph stage 1 status report, key movements on the project, obviously that we're in completion. As that yesterday we had resolution with the heliport around the location of the fencing, so that can now be undertaken. I know it's a small piece of the project, but at least it's a piece to move forward. The other bits that have made progression around the closeout items. We've been working with the contractor and the consultants around those. There is still some discrepancy in the survey data around the crest heights. And we have had some discussions with the design team around how much of a difference that's actually going to make, and whether it's actually worth altering that based on the fact that we had 2 meters of freeboard. Is something between 50 and 100 mil going to make a difference with the fact that we have the tartary revulsion? So that's a question that I put to them around that versus getting the contractor to come back and top up some of those low spots. So I have said, well, look, resolve the data query first between the survey and the as-builts, and then answer their question secondary to that, whether we need to go and take that up. The other works that are in relation to Frank Joseph stage 1 is the investigation into the proposed solutions for the ponding of the stormwater. So we've gone to, I had a meeting with Tetra Tech yesterday around that. They are not far off completing their revised report. So they did have an initial report with some of their findings of the event. They have now come back and said that they are proposing a couple of different options, but they also undertook further site walkover when we were down on site, not last week, the week before, in particular around the Scenic Hotel Group site, and where the overflow water paths go from NZTA's paths, which have not been maintained
for some considerable amount of time. So we should have that with the options and some costings on those options by the end of this month. And be in a position to be able to present some solutions to this committee.
Any questions on all that? That's about the two main ones, isn't it?
Yeah.
Then signed off. Well, depending on.
So there's two parts to play at that. There's also just the finalisation of the final account with the contractor. And so that's the only review part to that. So once we have this data sorted out, then that's the contractor side. The other one, the stormwater, doesn't anything to do with MD.
So.
But however, we may request them to do some additional work.
Mr. Chairman, I think if we can meet the time frame, it'd be very good to have that stormwater report from Tetra Coffee, the revised one, at the next operations meeting, if we can make that. And can I also say it'd be rather good if we had Ben and Tetra Coffee available on screen to answer any questions of the councillors on that report. Thanks.
Through the chair. Did you say, Scott, that they had a preliminary report on that?
Yes, it was a draft report.
Is there much tweaking to be done to get that?
So we have discussed around rewriting, actually putting out an addendum to that report to actually give quite clear direction. So one is actually what happened during the event, and what were some solutions, but we've had some feedback from some other engineers and also NZTA and WDC, but it's now turning out that in terms of like an options report and what can happen, that should be really written as a secondary report. So I have asked Ben to finalise the first report and then issue the addendum.
Yep.
Is that the district council's responsibility?
Look, I can't confirm exactly where it is. There are some issues with historic issues with the stormwater. However, what we've looked at in a sense of what has the project done and what can happen with that in relation to the between the Link Bank and the NZTA Bank.
So let's not prejudge that.
Yes.
Let's get the report.
Yep.
And have a
Get on with
look at it properly when the report is.
There hasn't been another event, has there? So really be another, just a one-off.
At the stage.
Yep.
But I'll arrange for Ben to be in attendance in that report.
I'll be happy to move stage one, Frank Joseph. Yep.
Peter, you involved, wasn't it?
And councillors, just in relation to stage one, and I don't know if Joe recollects the date, but I think we have a date for a formal opening of stage one.
I want to say 6th of June, but
That's right, D-Day, that's right. D-Day, yeah, 6th of June, that's what it is, you're right, Joe. Well done. Yeah, so the invites are going out, and we're having Minister Jones for that, to open that, and maybe some other ministers are coming as well. So that'll go into the diaries. That's it.
I've abstained through conflict.
So, through the chair, is that tied up with the council meeting that time, or was that a different occasion?
We're working on that.
Off track.
It's the second one.
Stage two operations for the project. The recommendation is to receive the review and review the report, provide any feedback or queries via the West Coast Regional Council Capital Project Manager.
Yeah. Is it 30 minutes there?
Yeah. Okay. So friends, stage two, we had some pretty good progress there. Particularly, we had the working group meeting with the those nominated on the joint committee. It was a very productive meeting. We went through the scopes of the projects. We went through how we've established the budget and what we intend to do from a sort of financial tracking perspective. But we are sort of now in alignment with them around the priority orders, the scopes, and looking to get those through and get out to tender. And so I think it was quite a significant milestone. It was very different from the rating district meeting. They were quite engaging in terms of asking questions around the scope, but also asking, Ben Pascoe was there as well at the meeting and asking questions of the engineer. So I think it was a very sort of productive meeting, and it was sort of, as I said, on track with the preparation of the tender documentation and also obviously with the design documentation.
When's the next meeting then? Because things are gonna happen reasonably quickly, don't they?
They do. So as from our perspective, they didn't have any further questions on the scope or priority or where we were from a budget perspective on both on this rubbish dump stop bank, so the unlined and lined, and also the Miltons. The next meeting would then be in a discussion about preparation for the Harris extension, which was the only one outside of that.
And then PTA stopping,
which is all on hold pending further meetings with the NZTA. So I haven't, between Tom and I being on leave, haven't managed to arrange that meeting yet.
When is all this gonna come to the council? So okay, do we get to okay it or?
Do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, I'll have to speak for that.
Tom, just for the audio, could you just come to the table because of that? Very well, that door.
Okay, so just for the record, you guys will note that I emailed you an update, the outcome of the meeting with the Friends local representatives from the joint committee, and as Scott says, really positive productive conversation, and we felt that we came into that feeling or knowing that we had the mandate to proceed. So the next key decision for you guys, which we'll bring to you in the public excluded section of the meeting, is our proposed procurement approach. Okay. And so we'll discuss in that section how we propose to break down the contracts and the attributes and so on and so forth, and seek your approval to proceed to tender.
So just also from a design perspective, the designs that have been proposed haven't changed. So that scope hasn't changed. All of the only options that were discussed were around where Tetra Tech Coffee had groins, is whether we could look at a full rock armouring option. And so that would be something that would be tendered at the same time to understand that cost difference. We also discussed with them around the ongoing maintenance of groins versus not. And so that was something that would need to be considered.
Are you concerned about that? Well, just a status report, and Darryl might be able to give the info. What's the status report on the emergency works on Western District Council in front of the sewage ponds of February 2024?
Very timely inquiry, Councillor Ewan. Last week, I put a file note on the consent file saying that I called the Chief Executive of Western District Council and reminded her politely that she was going to call a meeting on that matter. And that was some time ago with no progress. And I really need, if that's what she would like to do, is to meet on that matter. Otherwise, we will just simply go to hearing, a hearing on that consent. And she undertook to organise that meeting. That was beginning of last week.
Yeah. That's just between the manager, not councillors.
No, my understanding is she's informed, the Chief Executive's informed me that the Mayor, the Western Mayor, wants to attend that meeting. And I said, well, if it's going to be attended by mayor and perhaps other councillors, then I want the chair and other councillors from this council to attend that meeting as well. I tried to encourage that it was a technical matter about engineering, but respected her the council, Western District Council's decision about who they would like to have at that meeting. So the contention here, councillors, is that that extension of the Havels was built by Western District Council was built on incorrect alignment, or an alignment that we did not advocate having adverse effects. But the thing's built now, and so in a retrospective consent, the issue is whether the effects are more than minor, and for those councillors that are commissioners or understand that if it is and it can't be resolved, well then it's got to be notified.
So, on page 179, I've just one question for Scott. Once you got there on Franz Joseph stage 2, by putting all those mitigations at the top there, you've got that as risk is high. Were those mitigations that wouldn't drop at the medium, or would it still leave it high?
Yeah, I think what, even though you put the mitigations in there, I think the event, particularly around flooding, was that it has a high impact.
Yeah.
So even though if you put a mitigation strategy in place,
I think it's still high.
It's still high.
Yep,
Yes.
that's all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Question possibly for Daryl, but the alignment of the pedals wall, it's got nothing to do with the flooding.
Sorry.
The alignment of the pedals wall restriction has nothing to do with the stormwater.
Given the ponding bit. that
Yeah,
we
the
were talking
ponding
about,
bit, yeah.
no, that's it. Should. Yeah.
Could I just, no hurry, but provide a little bit more detail about the issue of NZTA, lack of maintenance, cleaning things out or something, as mentioned before?
Oh, so there is a drain that crosses under the road. So as part of our investigations into the flooding events, there is a water runoff or there are some culverts under the road, etc., that have overgrown with bush and etc. So that was just one of parts of it that around the Scenic Hotel Group site, there are other contributing factors to where the water is standing there. In particular, the event that happened, there was a lot of water that was just standing on their site anyway. So they are in the lower, almost in one of the lowest parts of the land in that particular location. And so we just identified that there is further work to the stormwater from the town. There's also water runoff from the road, and then there's also the ponding issue that are all contributing factors to that area.
Through the chair, historically, the runoff for the road from NZTA's, where did that end? Where did that go to? Didn't pond, must have run somewhere.
Yeah, it is still ponding, tracking away. Could be improved.
Right. It ends up in the sea, Peter.
Eventually.
Excuse me. Chair, if I could just come back to your question about when this is we'll come back to council. I think this is worth a conversation. Just so that we're all clear on how we move forward with this project, given that we've got a working group, joint committee, and councillors as final decision makers as well. And noting that right at the moment we're quite condensed on the time front. Okay, so I think in my head, and I really appreciate feedback on this, if I can, please. Our first call off the rank was to meet with the working group and get them engaged and on board and supportive. And as a result of, or the outcome of that meeting, I communicated to you guys and then again just to the joint committee this morning. So it would be, we've been very clear with that working group that the decision making, we take their feedback on board, but the decisions still come back to council. And in my mind, the next key decision for you guys is, knowing what Scott said, the designs that we presented to the working group were not substantially different from what those that attended the joint committee meeting, councillors that attended the joint committee meeting, saw. That the next key decision is around our procurement approach. All right. And then if you guys prove that procurement approach and we go away, we go out to tender, and then the next thing I need to talk to you about is timing on approving the tender evaluation report. Okay. So timing wise, we're aiming to have that to come to this committee at the May 20 meeting. Noting that I think that's a full council decision, I believe. So we need to think about how we manage that as part of the next operations committee meeting. Okay. All right. So does that give you some comfort that we haven't forgotten about you and that we're still, very much wanting to keep you, or you need to be making those final decisions based on the feedback you get from the community and from staff?
Thanks a lot, keep in the loop.
Yep. No, agree.
Can I just add here that, look, the pressure we're under is we've got to get machines working down there before 30 June. Otherwise we will lose the money. Yeah, and respect that. What I want to say to the team, my team, is that if you are ready with that documentation before May 20, then I'm sure that councillors would agree to an extraordinary meeting online just to consider it, to give you even a better time frame and run into getting the thing with it. That be right, councillors?
Yep, agree with that.
Thank you.
Just one more question about the stormwater. Is it possible that obviously the Senate group old hotel there is very overgrown and possibly boring or neglected? Could that be contributing to the water runoff? Because obviously that's water.
So it's not related to the ponding issue.
Not related to ponding. All right, we'll move on to more.
Do you want to move it for that report?
I just want to ask a question to the chief. The Moultons and others stop bank, is that for extension or is 2.6 million allocated to that?
Yeah, not at this stage, councillor Campbell, but that doesn't rule it out, depending on what the community, depending on how the tenders come in for this early priority work and what we've got left to work with in the budget and what community sees as priorities. Okay. Yeah.
We're going to move for that.
Yep, I'll move it. Seconded?
There's one on there. One was a favour. One.
Oh.
Under check operations.
1.3.
Working day.
Thank you, through the chair. Key things that have moved with relation to Hokitika River Walls is obviously the defects are well underway. We've received the as-built documentation and we've done a review with the consultants around all of the volumes, etc., and there in terms of the final account. There are two defects that remain outstanding, particularly around the top of the retaining wall and how we rectify that. So I think we're pretty close to having a solution for that particular item. And the other part is whether we complete some additional headwall work to some of the stormwater outlets. That's just around understanding where the final alignment was in relation to the existing outlets, and there seems to be some overstocking on the documentation of that quarry rubble itself. So it's looking at potentially doing some additional works to a couple of those smaller outlets.
And this is the 1B.
That's on stage 1B, correct. The other key things that we're moving, particularly with stage 3, is developing up the cost estimates for the alternate option for the road and single laning. So that was at the additional request. So we've worked on that. We're pulling those full 2 budgets together. There's also been some discussions around the a preliminary geotechnical report and suitability of building on top of the walls, as well as there was some commentary around the steepness of the existing rock armouring. What we're intending to do is to wrap all of this up into a report for the next month's meeting to give the costings for the alternative single laning and earth embankment option versus the retaining wall options, and also where we sit in terms of the existing embankments and armouring. So all of that to this group.
So that you're talking about the armouring on the inside of the wall, what made us go? This is what we're talking about.
We're talking about the right from where we join into the sunset point, so just below the boat ramp, right up to the bridge.
Is it concerning the white papers? I mean, this is everybody gets really wrong. I mean,
well, there's 2 things. We've looked at this from a pure engineering perspective of the impact of the rock armouring and the fact that it hasn't had a lot of maintenance over a number of years, and that there are some loose rocks, but also the steepness of the rock itself.
Yeah.
If I can just add to that, I mean, I think what that preliminary report's telling us is that there are some things that we need to think about quite carefully about elements of it in terms of its current condition, and therefore the best strategy for getting value for money in terms of what we do with it going forward. Does that make sense?
you live down there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you'll be right back.
So the intention there,
You know, find a middle ground if that's what people.
Yeah.
Said about it.
so
Steepness of the wall is quite, you know, you've got to imagine to people fall in there, how to do that.
So as Scott says, we're approaching this at the moment with the engineering mind, but the consultation side of things hasn't kicked off just yet, and that's the next step, is once we've got those options presented to you guys and a firm steer on which way forward, then that getting engaged, getting the various stakeholders engaged with what could help.
Because in a lot of the rebuilding Christchurch, you could buy a brick for churches and stuff. And one option might be to buy a white bait stand that we could provide.
Yeah, okay.
Pretty cost. They'll offset this.
It's not many stands down there, but is there?
There's none below the state highway bridge, no.
It's all free for all up to a certain point.
I don't have anything there.
So you move that report?
I'm happy to move. Yep. Second.
Mark. So, next one is the Grant Operations Committee. Recommendations to receive the report.
Okay, so particularly here we have obviously the completions of stage 1 and 3. We also noted since the power poles have been relocated that there were some defects that needed to be remediated, particularly around the sleeves that were installed. That work has been taken. The second part of this is it relates to stage 1, where we are doing that work for Western Mineral Sands. in terms of the concept. So we originally had a 2-week design period for David Ogilvy to complete that works. Unfortunately, they didn't meet that time frame. They were about a week behind where we were at. However, this week we are on track to prepare or get the costings back. So we've been liaising directly with NBD in terms of the costs that come out of the previous stage, and then what is the cost of the new stage looks like. That's only just a portion of the costings. There's also direct other consultants' costs in relation to the resource consent amendment. There'll be some geotechnical investigations. There's a whole lot of things that factor into that overall cost that will be presented to WMS. So we've drafted the initial part. We've had some feedback in terms of the Grey Heritage team, so that we've had some consultation with them. So that's all going to form part of the sort of initial feasibility. We have been trying to work with GDC's team as well. I understand Curtis is pretty busy in terms of his current role. Yeah, and he's on link this week as well. So there will be, the report will be subject to sort of GDC's sort of acceptance of the concept as well. However, that information will be provided to WMS to, at least from a financial perspective, be in a position to make a decision whether they want to proceed there. The other part is what we have prepared the instruction and instructed NBD to complete the uplift works as well. So that should be mobilising to do that shortly, noting that we've got this Easter period. So it has taken a bit of time for just clarity for pulling out the redesign work from DO to be able to give that information on heights and levels and rest levels, which were different from the original design, for them to go and complete that work.
Is there a time frame around that decision?
Yes, so we spoke at the last committee meeting around a month for us to get the information to them and a month to get them to make that decision.
So 4 weeks.
Yep. So we have, even though it has been DO sort of holding that particular part up, we have said that we would like to at least have a decision for them prior to coming back to the next committee meeting.
Yep.
On the 20th.
Thank you.
Recommendation was to receive the report. We've got a motive. Seconded Mark.
Just one question on number 4. Funds from the Western Early Warning Project.
Oh,
Was it?
that's a historic. So what happened there was when the early warning system, when we did the final accounts with Kanoa, there was a small, I think it was like $4,000 available from that project. We did a formal transfer that from that project to Grey.
Okay, later.
Yeah. $4,000.
Yeah.
Get ripped off, Chris.
So did you get the movies and that up and going?
Yeah. Andy moved, you seconded it.
Yep. Done.
All those in favour, aye. So that comes to the end of the public business.
General business.
Is there a lot of this not just the?
No general business for me.
No.
General business? No. No. I think it's pretty much all covered in discussions.
Covered on the next report.
Is it? So those meeting there for lunch. We need to go into public excluding more.
Yep, just
Okay.
read that back.
Right. I move that the public be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings of this meeting, namely agenda items 12 to 15, all inclusive. Move it, Peter. Edward. Chris.
And I move we adjourn.
Lunch.
Second that.
You still have